What happens in Commorragh when you fall out of favour with the ruler of that city, the Dark Eldar Vect? Lelith finds herself in that situation. She is currently allied to the Inari, who have taken away her soul thirst. A harlequin approaches her and says he's there to dance. She faces him. The Inari are travelling with Ivrain, and Ivrain herself watch on. Lelith finds the harlequin a real challenge. Over time, she finds weakness in his style, slowness when attacking her neck, and when he gets off balance, when she draws him into it, her knife touches his throat. After, from a harlequin's performance, she realises Vect wants her back in Commorragh. She learns this through speaking with one of her allies, and also the lack of resources suddenly provided by him to her for the arena, and how the crowd disguises themselves now when they come to watch her group fight. Her new upcoming rivals are the 13th Knight, a cult. They are Vect's new darlings. She knew their leader, Manana Nathrax. Lelith had trained with Manana, who was also highly skilled. Where Lelith was precision, Manana fury. Lelith reached out to Manana, but got no reply. She was ignored. So she paid them an anonymous visit, and notes another guest is the harlequin she had fought earlier, disguised as a Prince Tanishar. Manana fights as Lelith watches, and Manana emerges covered only in her enemy's blood. The crowd loves it, and Lelith realises it was a mistake to appear, perhaps driven by her soul thirst. She's asked to join Manana in her chamber, where they meet. Lelith says Manana wants to be her, and that with the Inari she doesn't feel the soul thirst. There are other options Manana wants to take. Lelith's place beside Vect. Lelith asks if Vect is aware of the ties between them. Manana told him, she admits, and is angry, saying they fought and escaped Yoka together, and after, Lelith found an option that didn't involve her. Lelith sees the play Vect has made here, that Manana would get her attention, and as they have that connection, it would cause friction between them. And then as she leaves, Manana reveals she invited Lelith for this chat, as it was best to inspect the wound fully before you cauterize it. So Lelith goes on a raid to a craft world and gets various slaves there to help with her fights in the arena. As she returns to Commorragh, the harlequin appears again to tell Lelith that Manana and her forces are coming for Lelith, as she has made an attack on Manana's holdings, which is false, and it comes down to Manana fighting Lelith in the arena. Vect later agrees for it to happen in his personal auditorium. In the initial fighting, she overcomes Manana and says walk away. Vect might let her live, or she could go to the Inari. Manana said nothing. She remained motionless, her muscles tight beneath Lelith's grasp, with blood shooting out from the cut on her cheek. The bloody line on Lelith's abdomen pulsed in sympathy. Then Manana moved. She leaned into the blade, driving it into her own flesh, as she twisted out of Lelith's grasp and came away with more blood spilling from this new wound. Lelith grabbed for her again, but Manana was already out of reach, snatching up another dropped knife from the floor. The succubus of the 13th Knight lurched upright, blood dripping over the armour plates and slick fabric of her witch suit. Her face set in the expression that Lelith had become all too familiar with over the years in the arena. It was the face of a warrior who finally understood that they had lost and had decided to make their end game quickly. It was a face of hatred and grief and desperation. Manana was going to launch herself forward and throw everything into a final attack to make Lelith kill her quickly rather than take her time cutting her to pieces. Lelith rose to her feet as well. She could see the steps Manana was going to take as clearly as if they had been marked out for her in glowing phosphorus. She pictured the side step she would take, pictured the single elegant thrust that would drive her knife up through the bottom of Manana's jaw and into her brain, pictured the other succubus collapsing limply to the floor with her mouth nailed shut by the weapon that had punched clean through her head and was now emerging from the top of her skull. As Manana took her first step, the knife fell from Lelith's hand. She let her arms hang by her side, and her pulse thundered in her head. Lelith met Manana's eyes. Manana came in screaming, one hand stretched to grab Lelith, the other swinging the knife to plunge it into her breastbone, and still Lelith did not move. Manana's fingers closed around Lelith's shoulder, the tip of the knife plunging towards her, and stopped. Manana's face was a mask of hatred, inches from Lilith's own, the blade held quivering a mere finger's breadth from penetrating flesh. If she decided to straighten her arm and drive the knife into Lilith's heart, then Lilith would not be able to react quickly enough to stop her, and that same heart pounded as Lilith rode high on the exhilaration of letting her fate rest in the hands of another for the first time in her life. She was the Queen of Knives, the supreme gladiator, and she had dictated the outcome of every fight she had ever been in. Now she gave up that control and waited, trusting to her unerring instincts, trusting to what she had seen, no matter how unlikely it may seem. Morgana's face twisted and crumpled, and she stepped back. The hand holding the knife dropped to her side, and she closed her eyes, defeated. "Why can't I kill you?" she whispered. "You are in my head, you are in my dreams. You are who I want to be. So why can't I kill you?" The audience began to jeer. They had come to see pain and blood and death, and while they had received the first two, they were sorely lacking in the third. Lilith ignored their braying and stepped up to Morgana, raised her hand to press it against the bleeding wound in the other succubus's neck. Morgana shied away from her touch for a moment, but only for a moment, and she did not raise her knife again. It was true, all the ticks, all the flickers of some unspoken emotion. Morgana's soul, twisted and hollow though it undoubtedly was, had been at war with itself. Lilith had come into this fight knowing that she did not want to kill Morgana, but believing that she could make herself do it. Morgana had not truly been aware of her internal conflict until the moment she was facing it head-on, at which point he had struck like a tidal wave. "I saved you because you fascinate me," Lilith said. It felt like leaving herself unarmoured and alone to admit this, but it also felt like strength to confide this secret to the person most capable of hurting her. She raised Morgana's head and stared into her eyes as they opened. "And I left you because you fascinate me, and that is a weakness." Morgana said nothing. She simply stared. Lilith said nothing either. The audience was making their feelings clear, but to Lilith it was nothing more than the howling of beasts and vermin. However, there was one member of the audience who could not be ignored, who says, "If our combatants do not wish to give us a winner, then they both forfeit." Vect's voice was cold and hard and utterly disgusted. "Kill them." As panic set in amongst those in the audience, Lilith moved towards them and fights her way to Vect. She leaps and fights his incubi, up close, which is not to their advantage, and Morgana calls out behind, "You," and she turns and finishes another one, and then Vect moves, his scepter crashing into her side. The pain was excruciating. Lilith staggered sideways and fell as every nerve in her body screamed at her. She managed to keep hold of her knives, and a tremendous effort of will it took to do that, and she looked up to see the supreme Overlord take a step towards her with a triumphant sneer on his face. Another step, and Morgana was there, flying at him from the side with her teeth bared, with her white hair blotched pink with blood. All dreams of being his queen were gone. The grand succubus of the 13th night had heard her death pronouncement drop from Vect's dead lips, and she intended to carve them off his face in revenge. Had she been at full strength, then she might have succeeded, but she had lost a lot of blood from the wound on her neck, and the blows she launched at the Supreme Overlord did not have their usual quicksilver speed. Vect's shadow field flickered into existence, turning them aside, and he brought the scepter of the Dark City around to swat her like a troublesome flying insect. Morgana screamed and collapsed. "No," Lilith shouted, springing back to her feet. Vect whipped around in shock at the speed of her recovery, then disappeared when his shadow field activated as Lilith attacked. Her knives glanced off timorous energy, as though she was trying to cut through something stiffly gelatinous, but she kept up her furious assault. Shadow fields were not perfect, they could not be overloaded, and Vect knew that as well as she did. He struck at her, trying to bring her down before she could burn out his protection, but in doing so, he disrupted his own defences. Lilith stepped into the blow, lightning fast, and struck out at his weapon hand. Ornate armour and pallid flesh parted before her blade's edge, and she severed Vect's wrist. His shadow field sputtered uncertainly and disintegrated, and Lilith caught a momentary glimpse of his surprise. No pain, there was no glorious rush of pain to invigorate her. Did he feel anything? And then her blade was at his throat. Vect raised his chin to stare down his nose at her, apparently choosing to ignore the fact that His severed limb was bleeding onto the floor. Lelith? Asdrubael? Lelith snarled as the edge of a knife pressed into the skin of his neck. It galled me to let you strike me, but I had to lure you away from your throne somehow. Vect's eyes flickered past her for a moment to his seat of office. I see. Not quite so attentive as you made out. Politics is your battlefield, Vect. You lost the moment you set foot in mine. Well, I am so glad you haven't entirely lost your touch, he tuttered. This fondness, though, I never thought to see such weakness from the Queen of Knives. Now everyone knows how best to strike at you. Weakness? Lelith repeated. Yes, perhaps so. This is where we differ, you and I. You hide your weakness in order to appear strong. I have chosen to reveal mine and dare the galaxies to try and take advantage of it. I have no weakness, Vect declared. I have a blade to your throat and your hand on the floor. I also have a proposition for you. Indeed, Vect said, his eyebrows raising. Get your claws out of my affairs, Lelith said bluntly. Cease this shadow war. If the Cabal of the Black Heart wishes to take a prize, then I am sure that the Cult of Strife will gladly assist for a share of the spoils. But I am no one's creature. I will come and go as I please, and if I choose to assist the emissary in her quest to awaken her god and destroy sheer thirst, then this is no one's business but my own. And do you wish to make her life sacrosanct? Vect scoffed. Not at all, Lelith said, with a vicious smile. If she cannot protect herself and stay alive, then she makes a poor leader. But she may have my blade protecting her, or she may not. Her expression hardened. Morgana and Athrax, however, I will take any attack on her as an attack on myself. And why should I agree to any of your demands? Because I will cut your throat otherwise, Lelith said bluntly. I am well aware that this body may not be that of Vect. I know you of proxies, so once I've cut this throat, I will immediately go in search of any other throats you may have. I will lead the Cult of Strife against the Cabal of the Black Heart, upsetting the power balance in Commorragh, and I will not stop until it is destroyed. I will show all of Commorragh that I dare to stand up to you, and I will publicly call you coward again and again until you face me in the arena. Drukhari love glory, Vect, and I cover myself in it every night whilst you cower in your shadows and play puppets. You want to name me queen and give me an empty title? I will take your head and your crown, become a queen in truth, and Commorragh will accept me. It will worship me. Vect's eyes narrowed. Do not be so ridiculous. I know you have no desire to rule, and if my other options are to die or to live as your plaything, Lelith demanded. You backed me into a corner, Vect. These are the consequences. So, under such a high level of duress, he agrees to her terms. And after Morgana and Lelith talk, and Lelith agrees she will not leave Morgana behind again, they will remain close friends. And as she said it, images spun through her head of the two of them fighting side by side, back to back, bringing down the greatest warriors the galaxy had to offer. The dream she had for herself now shared with her ally. So I was surprised when reading the book how close she got to actually hurting Vect, but I guess that was kind of needed for that power balance to be put into play, where Vect is in a position that he has to agree to the demands of Lelith. And I also wonder, is Lelith's time with the Inari perhaps affecting her, which is why she's got this little bit of mercy, I would say. Now, Vect has more than the weapons you heard about in this video. He has sons that can carve Commorragh into pieces. If that sounds interesting to you, click on this next video.